All right, welcome back, guys. I want to cover today's game being the T1 versus G2 little, let's say, rematch, round two, what have you. And I think by the way T1 was drafting, they were not playing around. They were locked in here. They did not want to take any risks. They wanted to play by the book. I think this was potentially a risky matchup for T1 to go against a team like G2 who does not give a fuck about how they draft. But honestly, I think G2, usually their drafting is like super on the mark, but there's a couple points where they were just a little bit like I could feel the antsiness from them. They were scared of this new T1. Like they were reformed. And I could tell with some of their picks. On the surface, you're like, well, what do you mean, Quatch? It's the same like sort of crazy picks that they always go for. They're going for these really interesting takes on certain parts. I'm gonna talk about it because there's a touch of it in each of these games where I think they actually pick or they select their all-ins just a little bit too early, or they there's just a couple champions where they not necessarily have considered, and it actually gets pretty punishing for them. So let's start with game one. A couple of these bans are not too surprising at all. Okay, so let's see. We see the Sentinel ban out. It's very normal against T1. Ash's ban, probably perma. Lucian, it's like, it's arguable. I would say it's the most malleable. That's why it's banned third year, right? On the side of T1, obviously, we're going to banning out the most annoying, consistent sort of picks that affect T1 from playing the way that they want to play the game, right? So Tristana, I mentioned in another video, but I think for the rest of MSI, if the team can play with Tristana, T1 is going to ban it. And they understand that this is a weakness that they have at the moment. They struggle with playing around it, so they're just not going to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with the pacing of this champion. So they're simply just not going to do that. Zach is the same. They want to hedge against certain matchups. It opens up the champion pool in a way that other things do not. So that's basically how we got there. And T1, they have the Azir Oriana. G2 are a team that ban neither. I think this is the correct way to do it, in my opinion, personally, because I've seen teams like TL, they ban both Azir and Ori, and then they basically have only one ban in phase one. And it's kind of weird, right? It's very expensive, is the way I would say it. So let's see how this opens up. G2 pre-pick Draven, R1, R2 with Poppy. This is to hedge against Kalista Renata because it's already a favorable matchup, so they don't need to hide anything, and they're very comfortable on it. So I like the way this draft is going. G2, understanding that they want to create this level of chaos in order to kind of get an advantage within the game, they actually opt for the LeBlanc on 3, which is very interesting because this is a pick that's not necessarily strong because it's never been picked like at all, and the entire field is open. Like we see Azir, we see Nico, we see Talia. I think Talia is open as well. It's just things that they want to play the game of high tempo and being able to just create a lot of chaos on the map and prevent T1 from being able to breathe. And that's the idea here. They banned Cassante. I really like that. They could have also opted to just let it open and then counter pick on 5, but it's very possible that, you know, their pick on 4 kind of tells why they leave Cassante as a ban. The Xin ban is a little bit interesting though, because they actually end up going Kha'Zix on 4, which is on paper pretty strong, right? I think it's pretty decent, on concept, right? We've seen it. We've seen Canyon do it. He's looked for certain like if teams are picking certain compositions. Let's say they're going TF Vayne top, and they're going Callisto Renata bottom, and then there's always like a normal mage. Right? There's not much utility there, right? And you can punish these teams that end up going like double AD carry, or they go AD carry mid with Tristana, or AD carry top lane with something like the Kha'Zix. However, if you look back just a couple of steps in draft, this is a little bit too early. You can argue, well, we have to save top for 5, right? Because Poppy Flux, and it's going to be pretty strong here. I actually think G2, there's a conscious decision to make. It's a trade-off of, all right, so do we break this flex and save our jungle for 5? They're gonna read that something's up if we save jungle for 5. Like I'm kind of trying to reiterate like what's happening in G2's minds right now. If we save jungle for 5, it's kind of weird. I could go Kha'Zix here on 4. It's not bad. It's a pretty good matchup, but we have more of an all-in, right? Because they can tech their picks to deal with the Kha'Zix, right? So if let's say they break the Poppy flex, they can just go Poppy blind top, or they can just keep the Poppy support to deal with Kalista Renata. I would say keep Poppy top and leave Cassante open. Ban and then you have that option. Leaving Cassante open actually strengthens your Poppy pick, ironically, and that's the kind of the funny part about this. So we see the Kazakhs on 4. Ideally, we save it for 5 so that they can overextend with some picks, but they don't, and then they can get the punish. In terms of matchups, Sejuani is probably one of the worst for Kazakh statistically because she is a giant meatball, and Kazakh can try to jump on her, 1v1 her, and gain advantage through counter jungling and things like that. It is impossible. Like, it's very, very difficult for Kazakhs to gain any sort of advantage. The exchange for Kazakhs getting sacked is that Jax is the pick into Camille, and I believe the matchup is a lot better than it used to be thanks to the changes on the Rift on season 13. But at what cost, right? I think it's pretty rough to lose your basically completely sack your jungle. However, admittedly, the jungle pool is pretty choked at this point, right? We see Xin Zhao, Nidalee, Lee Sin, and Rek'Sai, right? What's left in the pool? There's not much. You could have gone like what, Lilia? Arguably not even, right? There's not that many blinds left, admittedly. Maybe J4 or something of that nature, or Viego, but I understand there's not much of the pool left. They wanted to get some sort of advantage, but I think if they're going to do something like the Kazakhs, it's on 5. And we kind of see this again and again every game, actually. So we'll jump to game 2. Similar bans, pretty much from G2, except they swap one of the bans for Renata. I believe it's the Lucian ban. So they're down to play the Lucian matchup, which is, like I said, it's the most malleable. T1 do not budge their bans at all because it's just like we don't want to deal with this in any slot. It's not like that. It's not like we're banning against priority picks per se. There's a lot of good picks in the pool right now in this meta, and you shouldn't be too pressed about giving up one champion. Like there's no tier zeros, let's say. So we do see G2 make the adjustment. They just open jungle and they save mid for phase 2 actually, which is a little bit interesting. I think it's fine personally because I think Caps has a pretty solid pool and they can save top as long as possible as well. So you get Cassante on 4. It's kind of weird to me because G2 banned the 2 strongest counters to Cassante, and then they give up Cassante. So I forget what they cook here. Aesol is fine. Urgot's also actually a pretty decent matchup, but it's pretty risky for them to ban 2 of the strongest counters and then just leave it up, right? And they pick the Poppy and Zax's ban. This is just the freest Cassante ban of my life. I mean, pick of my life. Because every bad counter in MSI this tournament against Cassante is pretty much gone. With the exception of like maybe Camille. But Camille's like, I would say, not even the strongest, out of all of them. So in this case, they probably lost a lot of confidence after trying such a crazy draft with the Kazakhs. So they went for something safer. And this was the outcome. And, while this is okay, I think what enables G2 to be able to gain such a strong advantage in draft is for their ability to take risks. And while this is to an extent arguably still the same thing, it seems a lot more sloppy than it was out of their usual expectations. Game 3. So they're like, it seems it's kind of a similar thing. They're like, hey guys, yo, remember we won on Tristana, right? They let it up. They banned Poppy, T1 banned Poppy. They're like, yo, Tristana's up. Let's do it. We could do the thing with the Ivern. So they pick Ivern on 2, actually. And they just straight up go for it. Like they don't even care which enemy jungler it is in this case. And I think, although Ivern with the Tristana sounds like a great combo, and they probably wanted to save like top and support for phase 2, it's like a little risky to, again, like the last time they picked it as Zinza, which is an excellent matchup. The Vi, on the other hand, it has a little bit more trouble peeling back with. And in this case, T1, even though they have an enchanter jungler on the side of G2, it's not that hard for T1 to really swing for it. So you can see this clearly with the Nautilus investment. I actually really like the Braum adjustment because there's a lot of defensive capability here. And then they blind Jax. because there's not much left in their eyes. But you can see here, like, they are showing more cards than they should be, in my opinion, because a lot of these picks, they're arguably like all-in picks, and you know, based on the notes I have here, it's it's pretty hard for G2, and just their timings are off just slightly. And I think that's what, maybe that's the intimidation of T1 got to them. So I just want to point that out. Um, G2 is still a pretty strong team. I'm sure on another day, if they're feeling like super confident, they could probably easily take a series from T1, right? But today was not their day, and it was a little bit unfortunate. And just really minor adjustments that completely shake up the draft. And I think this is a classic example of that. And I wanted to point that out to you guys. So hopefully that was insightful. And I'll see you in the next one.